everyone thinks they have an idea until they test it. And usually people are reasonably good at execution, but often they end up building something that no one needs. And there's data that supports that as well, that the number one source of startup failure is no market need for whatever it is that they've built.
There's a lot of talk about innovation, but very few people spend their time figuring out how ideas actually turn into real-world impact. Today's guest is one of those people. Welcome to another episode of School to Startup, brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been supporting the global university ecosystem for over 12 years. For our university partnerships, we work with institutions driving innovation and entrepreneurship, and this series highlights the academic leaders making that happen. I'm Harish, your host today, and joining us is Professor Tim, Director of Liveris Academy for Innovation and Leadership at University of Queensland. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Harish. Thanks for having me.
Great. I have to ask you this before we go deeper. You have spent years studying innovation. So if a startup fails, is it because the idea was bad, the execution was bad, or they just didn't talk to enough customers?
It's usually because they haven't spoken to enough customers. The challenge is that often, like everyone thinks they have an idea until they test it. And usually people are reasonably good at execution, but often they end up building something that no one needs. And there's data that supports that as well, that the number one source of startup failure is no market need for whatever it is that they've built.
Interesting. So can you tell us a bit about your journey? What pulled you into academia and innovation in the first place?
Yep. Well, it took me a long time to get there. So my undergraduate degree was in economics. I did that at a university that had fairly limited degrees, so they didn't have business, but I wanted to go into business, and economics was the closest I could get. So once I graduated, I then had a series of sales and managerial roles in a whole series of industries and all around the world. So I've managed in organizations in the US, in New Zealand, and here in Australia. And the industries that I was in were radio, office equipment, industrial chemicals, higher education. And my last real job before I went into academia was in a software startup. That imploded, as they tend to. That happened just after my wife and I moved to Brisbane in 2000. And after that, I decided that I wasn't that happy with the roles I was running into. And so I decided it's time to do an MBA. So I signed up for the MBA at UQ, which is also where my wife is working as a professor. Did the MBA. While I was doing that, we had a series of career development workshops. The two things that kept coming up as things I would be suited to were academia and consulting. And I figured that if I had a PhD and I was in a business school, I could do both. So I finished the MBA, went straight into a PhD, did that as fast as I could because by then I was starting to get old. And once I finished that in 2007, I was really fortunate to be offered a role in the UQ Business School. So that's where my academic career started. But I had that background in managing and in innovation and in startups before I got there. And so I've drawn from that experience through my whole career as an academic. At UQ, I've done all kinds of stuff. So I was hired to start to design and deliver the MBA innovation program. So UQ was the first MBA program in Australia to have a required innovation course. And so I was hired to actually set that up. So that's what I did. We then started with Exec Ed. After that, we had a partnership with the Wharton Business School that I was in charge of. We ran that for about 9 years. While all that was going on, I did some work with the CSIRO, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, and we developed a Lean Launchpad program. We basically adapted the innovation core program from the National Science Foundation in the US. We made an Australian version of that. So I worked really closely with them for about 5 years to build that and to get that going. It's now called the ON program. And we've had thousands of research teams go through that. I was the MBA director for a while and had a few other admin roles within the business school. And then 3 years ago, I moved over into a different faculty in UQ to run the Liveris Academy for Innovation and Leadership. And so that academy is philanthropically funded. And the idea with that is we're trying to take very high achieving undergraduate students who have a commitment to sustainability and provide them with an extracurricular program that allows them to develop innovation and leadership skills so that once they get out into the world, they hopefully will have a bigger impact faster. And so that's what I'm currently doing at UQ.
Amazing. You've also been working a lot with lean launchpad approaches. So what's the biggest mindset shift researchers need to make when they go from publishing ideas to building something people actually want?
It's a great question, and that ON program that I collaborated with the CSIRO on was designed to address exactly that problem. Because in academia, or even if you're in a Commonwealth research organization, you're primarily rewarded for publishing. And the idea, and I as an academic myself, I understand that you send a paper off, and once you've done that, even though it goes through the review process, it's history. You're on to the next idea, because that's the fun thing, is grappling with ideas. But papers don't turn into things. And so if you're doing research that's designed to save the Great Barrier Reef, or to make AI safe, or any number of things, it's not often enough to just publish the paper. You actually have to get people to use those ideas and apply those ideas out in the world. And that's where the gap is. And so, if you look at any innovation ecosystem or entrepreneurial ecosystem, you'll have a lot of people with really great ideas. A smaller percentage of those get to the point where they say, okay, well, let's build a startup or try to license it or do something that will get it out there. And then a smaller subset of that group will actually launch. And then a smaller set of that group will succeed. And then a tiny proportion of all of those will become super scalers and end up impacting the entire economy of a country or the world or things like that. And that critical step is that second step when you're going in between. We have a great idea and we've launched, right? Because that intermediate step is where you have to actually figure out, is that idea any good? And for some reason, everyone skips it. And it doesn't matter if you're a researcher or a startup entrepreneur or a large corporate, everyone skips that validation step. And so that's when I observed that in Australia, when I did a lot of work with startup accelerators. And what I realized is that the common failure mode here is that accelerators are working with startups that don't have anything to accelerate because they actually haven't validated a business model. So they're walking into an accelerator with an idea, and then they spend all their time in the accelerator doing remedial work to figure out, is it any good? And so by the time they actually launch it, they still don't know if it's any good, and then mostly it fails, like my software startup did that I was involved with. And so that's the gap that I've been trying to fill for kind of 16 years. And I've done it with corporates, I've done it with startups, I've done it with researchers. And that's what drew me to Lean Launchpad, is that it's specifically designed to work out, do we have something that somebody really needs? That idea of looking for product market fit, where there's a genuine problem that a lot of people understand they have, and you've got a way to actually address it. If you have that and you launch, your chances of success just quadrupled, right? And so it's still staggering to me that a lot of people want to skip that step. But that's, that leap from here's the idea, let's launch it. That's the thing that's killing everyone in this space, whether it's a researcher or anything else. So that's what I've been trying to work on.
Very interesting. You have worked closely with universities and organizations to translate the research into practice, as you're told. Where do most good ideas get stuck? Is it the system, the people, or just the hesitation?
It's another good question, and it really varies from organization to organization and even country to country. One of the things that we have in Australia is that it's extraordinarily hard to get IP out of universities. And so even if you have an idea that's strongly commercializable, the incentives here are really lined up to primarily support licensing it to an existing large company. And so when you hear about Australian university innovation success stories, they're almost always things that end in licenses. So at UQ, our biggest one is Gardasil. That's the vaccine that prevents cervical cancer. It's saved thousands of lives. It's one of the most successful drug development processes that we've undergone in Australia or the Southern Hemisphere, to be honest. But it's licensed, right? So it actually got licensed through multiple companies before it actually got on the market. And that's the model. And so here, the blockage point is really, can we, if you're a researcher and you've come up with a great idea, can we actually get it out of the institution if the best place for it is a startup? And often we don't know where the best place for it is until you've done that customer development, product market fit, conversations to work out what's going on. So that's one spot where it fails. I think a lot of times the other thing is that, especially with researchers, even though researchers often become successful founders and successful CEOs, there's a real hesitation to actually follow that route. And part of it is you're often in institutions where you're doing something that you love. Most people that research because they're passionate about whatever problem it is that they're trying to learn about and to solve. And so the idea that you would do something that would take you out of that setting and then move out into the world to try to do something with it, it doesn't kind of match up with the way that people have set their careers up. Right. And so the other thing, if you look at, especially a lot of the Asian nations that have been successful in this space, like Taiwan, Singapore, Japan, Korea, they've set up very easy off-ramps and on-ramps back in between academia and industry. So that transition is actually quite smooth. It's harder in Australia. It's harder even actually in the US than it is in those countries. And so, so there are things systemically that we can do that address a lot of these issues, but you're still kind of stuck. You have to deal with whatever system you're operating in, and that's often the biggest obstacle.
Interesting. Talking about the academia, at the Liveris Academy, you're shaping future of leaders. So what's one mind shift or a habit that separates students who actually build things from those who just keep thinking about the ideas?
Yeah, it's, I don't know if there's one mindset shift. I do think that, we've done a lot of work on building entrepreneurial mindsets in UQ. And there was a story, it was from one of the Triple Helix books, I can't remember which one, but there was a story of an entrepreneurship researcher that walked into an arts class, and it was about 250 students in that. And he said, "How many of you want to be entrepreneurs?" And about 2 people raised their hands. He paused for a second, and then he said, "Okay, how many of you want to start something?" It could be a literary magazine, it can be a theater troupe, it can be, it could be a shop or an entrepreneurial venture, but who wants to start something? And then about 2/3 of the people raised their hand. And so that idea of working with students so that they gain that entrepreneurial mindset is really valuable, even if they're never going to actually launch a business. And so that's really what I focused on that even before I got into running the academy, was working across campus to try to help people with developing tools and methods and exercises that people can undertake that would help with developing that entrepreneurial mindset amongst students. Because the other thing that's kind of staggering that we did just a study of the course profiles at UQ. Entrepreneurship and innovation are taught or at least mentioned in about 180 different classes. The vast majority of those are outside of the business school. So I have no idea what people are teaching when they're teaching entrepreneurship and innovation. And so we also just tried to work out, well, let's actually make sure that those people have the right tools so that we're kind of, working on a united front when we're trying to build that entrepreneurial mindset amongst people. So it's a number of different things like that, but it's really that just helping people make that transition into an ambition for building.
I have a follow-up question on this. So what makes the University of Queensland different from other universities in terms of training, entrepreneurship, and innovation?
Part of it is we have had from the time that I started all the way to the present an exceptional number of, or a high number of exceptional researchers in this space. And so we have a very good knowledge base around what works and what doesn't. And so that's mostly been out of the business school. And several of them are people that have also been interviewed for this series previously. And so you know a little bit about what that system looks like. And so we have, in the business school itself, and then outside of the business school, there's a few more of us that have moved on to other roles in the university. We've got probably 12 or 15 people that spend a fair bit of time thinking about how do we make this work. And so that's one part of the equation. The second part of the equation is we have an institution called UQ Ventures, and that runs a series of programs for people. It started out primarily running an accelerator called iLab, and then subsequently they realized they actually need that end-to-end process, and so they've added programs on. So the second thing that they added was a thing that they called Ideate, which is for people that are curious. They don't know what they want to build. They just have the sense that I'd like to learn more about this space. And so they can go through Ideate and develop ideas and just work out, do we think we're on the right track? Does it seem like it's something worth doing? And then a few years ago, along with Cameron Turner, in the business school, we built a thing that we called Validate, which was Lean Launchpad again, because again, that was the missing link. And so we built Validate in the middle for actually saying, okay, you've got a good idea. You went through Ideate, you've come out of it with an idea that you're pretty sure it's on the right track. Now let's validate it so that you got a business model. And then once you've done that, then you're a good candidate for iLab, the accelerator. And so we have that end-to-end bit. So you have that set of programs and ventures going, and then you've got the research program going on in the business school, and we work really closely together. And the consequence of all of that is that all of the things that we're trying to do with students in the venture side is supported by research. So we're evidence-based in all of that work. And some of the other universities that I've worked with in this capacity don't have that strong an evidence base. They're doing something that they've heard works. They don't have the research base to actually draw from internal expertise. And so they're often making a copy of something that started in the US and then came to Australia and then ended up with them. And so I think it's that real combination between having people that are active in the space that then collaborate with the people that are working directly with the students. Right? And then we have similar things going on the academic commercialization side. We have another group called UniQuest. I mentioned Gardasil earlier. UniQuest was the organizational unit that helped the researchers take that out in the market, Ian Fraser and his research partners. And so we have kind of all three parts covered. We have the knowledge-based side of it, we've got the student side, and then we have the researcher side. And I think it's the symbiosis between the three and the strong combination of, again, evidence base and action that's made us successful in those spaces.
Very interesting. So for students, researchers, or early stage founders watching this, what should they focus on right now to prepare for the future?
It's a bit of a challenge, and we talked about the academy that I'm running. One of the part of the impetus for setting it up was that, we're facing a high degree of change right now. I don't have to talk to you about geopolitical problems, right, which are staring us right in the face. If you're watching this a year from now, hopefully things have calmed down, but right now, everything is going nuts. So there's geopolitics, which is having a huge impact on people. There's the rise of AI, and we still don't really know what that's going to look like. 3-4 years ago, everyone was talking about Bitcoin and the blockchain and how that was going to change everything. And then we have just different ways of managing and addressing things. And so there's turbulence. There's a lot of turbulence. If you're a 20 or 21-year-old university student, the ones that I talk to, they're pretty concerned about what their future looks like right now. And so if I really think about, well, what's the skill set that you're going to need to face that level of uncertainty. And there's a few things. One part is getting more comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. That's another of the huge values of going through any kind of entrepreneurship practice as an undergrad when you're in a relatively safe space, is that you can get used to decision-making when you don't know if you're right or not. That's a really hard thing to get used to. And if you have that skill when you're going out in the world, it doesn't matter if you're going into a corporate role, a government role, or an entrepreneurial role, you need that skill set. And you need it much more now than you did back when I was that age. So that's one thing. Then the second thing is, I've been quite closely involved with tech for ages. So even before I was in academia and studying innovation, I was in the software startup, I was doing tech roles prior to that. Tech's really important, but the best piece of software in the world can't fix a broken underlying system. So we also need to have just our processes in place, our managerial processes, so that we're doing correct things in the right sequence, treating people well, having a good value proposition, dealing with our customers correctly, all that kind of stuff. That foundation has to be there to make things work. And then I think the last thing that's really important in all of this is just being able to build connections with people, which sounds really old school when we're talking about, now we have AI and ChatGPT and all the other tools that we've got. But the one thing that I think is really hard for tech to replicate is going out and having those one-to-one connections where you can actually learn about, what is it, Harish, that's bothering you right now? Talk to me, and being able to have those kinds of conversations are critically important. And I think they're going to continue to be critically important. And so that's the kind of toolkit that we're trying to help people build and be able to apply when they're going out into the world. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you're going into industry, government, or entrepreneurship. That skill set still stays the same.
Right. Amazing. And finally, where can people follow your work or learn more about what you're building?
I think the simplest place is my website. It's just timkastelle.org. So all lowercase, all one word, timkastelle.org. I update everything there. You can find, if you're interested in my academic work, I'll send you to Google Scholar and my UQ page. If you're, I've got a tiny startup on the side right now that I'm working on with my friend Nilofer Merchant that is trying to work on that human connection side of innovation. So that's called the Intangible Labs. There's a link to that from my site as well. So basically, if you go there, you can get to everything that's going on. My social media accounts are also accessible through that.
Perfect. All the links will be available in the comment section. You can click on that and connect with Tim. Tim, this was insightful and honestly a lot more practical than people expect when they hear innovation research. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks for having me again. Yep. Bye.
Great. That was Professor Tim. And if there is one takeaway from this conversation, it's innovation isn't just about ideas. It's about talking to the right people and turning those ideas into something real. Thank you so much for being part of this episode and sharing your insights with us. And to everyone watching, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and click on the bell icon so you don't miss out our upcoming session. See you in the next episode of School to Startup.